Thank you, Contest Master.
Contestant number 3, Akash B. Shetty. What's your title? What's your title, Akash B. Shetty?
When I was in my 7th grade, people called me the clown of the class. And my English teacher, who by the way was very pretty, said with an accent, "Don't judge a book by its cover." And I asked, "Ma'am, if we don't judge books by their covers, shouldn't all the cover designers in the world just quit their job?" It was a genuine, valid question, all right, and all my classmates laughed, thinking I was making yet another joke. But what my teacher said next stuck with me, and I remember it even today. She said, "Akash, my sweet boy, get out of the class." Good morning, Contest Master, and thank you for asking me that question. What's your title? Fellow Toastmasters and distinguished guests, is this a question that we haven't found an answer to? You see, as a kid, I had a lot of questions that would be left unanswered by people like my English teacher. But there was one person in the world who wouldn't stop me from asking even the stupidest questions. My father. The day that teacher kicked me out of class, I went home to tell my dad about it. And as usual, he was watching the news. And let me tell you about this weird habit my dad has. He doesn't respond until I call him for the 3rd time. I go up to him and I said, "Dad, Dad, Dad, what is it, Akash?" I explained to him what happened at school, and he said, if all the cover designers in the world quit their job, and all the books in the world had the same plain black cover, do you think we humans would stop judging?" Yeah? You're wrong. We would judge books by their title. Imagine this, if your life was a book, what would be your title? Wow. I was spellbound, but I did not have an answer to that question. However, in my 9th grade, I discovered I have a passion for writing. I went on to publish my first book, and the title of my life seemed much clearer now, Akash the Writer. I remember the first copy of my book arriving, and the only person that I wanted to show it to was my father. He wasn't well at that time. The doctors visiting the house had become a common thing, so instead of watching the news, he was on the bed taking a rest. I go up to him and I said, "Dad, Dad, Dad, what is it, Akash?" "I published my first book. Here, take a look." I was confused because he didn't say anything, and there were tears in his eyes. And as if to change the topic, I said, "Dad, you never told me if your life was a book, what would be your title?" He smiled. I see myself as the businessman now, but if I think about it, I don't think it really matters, son. Because eventually I won't be remembered by the title I give myself. I will be remembered by the title people around me are going to give me. And that will be defined by the things I do, the kind of story I decide to write. Wow, the kind of story I decide to write. I was spellbound again. That night, I went to sleep peacefully, thinking I would show my book off to everyone at school tomorrow. The next morning, my mom woke me up. I rubbed my eyes, but for some reason, it was still dark. I looked at the clock and it was 11 p.m. Why would my mom wake me up? I sat up and my mom gave me a tight hug. "Mom, what happened?" She didn't respond. My heart started to beat faster. I felt nauseous. I let go of her and I went to my dad's room, and he was right there, sleeping peacefully. "Dad, Dad. Dad? I wanted him to say, "What is it, Akash?" one more time. But I was greeted with silence. And that silence was deafening. Ladies and gentlemen, the contest master asked me, "What's your title?" And the answer is, I don't have one. In fact, I don't want to have one. Because when the final chapter of your life will be written, the title you give yourself won't matter. The titles the others give you will. And I'm not saying people are always going to give you a good title and say, the writer. Few people might remember you as the clown of the class. But what we can do is write such a story, live such a life that more people remember the good in you than the bad. Today I can proudly say that my dad isn't remembered as the businessman or by any other negative titles. He is remembered as the guardian, the comedian, the hard worker, the breadwinner, and the best dad in the entire universe. Because he didn't ask himself what his title is. He always asked what his story would be. So ladies and gentlemen, what will your story